Good morning. All right.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, here we go. Chevra, the last daf of this Perek. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN daf Nun Beis. We are beginning now the new Mishnah, 10 lines from the top of the Amid. We are going to give continuity to the machloikes that we had between Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Meir in the case of someone who verbally designated an eruv at a certain precise, exact location. Now, the case of the Mishnah will be someone who owns two homes. He owns a home in city A. He owns a home in city B. The understanding of this new Mishnah will be based on the Shita of Rav Nachman that we learned yesterday. What does Rav Nachman say? Rav Nachman understands that the machlokes between Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda is only if someone is being ma'arev b'raglov. In other words, a person is saying that shvi sasi d'mekoimi without putting any bread. That the sheet of Rav Meir is that only an ani could be ma'arev b'raglov, but not a asher. Right? L'Rav Nachman, l'Rav Meir, the ikir eruv is bepas. Right? Rabbi Yehuda is the lenient one that holds that even though even an asher can be ma'arev beraglov. Masha'en kain, according to Rav Nachman, if a person is making this oral, verbal designation, as long as they are pointing to a specific place that we learned yesterday, Rav Shita, that they can actually run and make it there before Shabbos, then l'kula alma, according to Rav Nachman, only an ani. An ani doesn't mean the normal meaning of an ani. An ani means only a traveler. To him, normally he doesn't have a lot of food with him. So they allowed for an ani to make an eruv even without placing pas, even though he's not there. But an asher, l'kula alma, that means if you are at home and you're saying, I want my eruv to be at that place, even though that place is 2,000 amos or closer from you, and even though you can make it there, according to Rav Nachman, l'kula alma, an asher cannot make this verbal declaration. Based on Rav Nachman, we will understand the new Mishnah. Now we're going to actually learn another Tana that will hold that in certain circumstances, this concept of designating a makim eruv, a makim shvisa, without you being there, without you sending bread, can even happen even without a verbal declaration, as we'll learn a case. That will be the most lenient application of the sugya of a verbal declaration. We're going to be learning a new nuance in Chamor Gamol. Guys, Chamor Gamol we had the first time on Daf Lamed Hey, and that is when a person placed an eruv, but there was a suffix, remember that? There was a suffix whether the eruv actually was there during the Ben Hashmashas period. Maybe for sure in Shabbos we know now that an animal ate it up. We just don't know when the animal ate it up. And therefore, we had this concept that if you have a Suffolk Eruv, well, maybe if the Eruv was not valid, then you took on Shabbos in your city. Then here is your Makom Shvisa. If the Eruv was valid, then there is your Makom Shvisa. Chamor Gamol means that you can only walk in areas that are in both Eruvim, only in the overlap. You're like stuck between here and there. While a chamor, a donkey was led from behind. A camel is led from the front. In other words, wherever you go, you're in a very tight position. That was the application that we had until Daf Nun Beis. Now we're going to learn another application according to Rav Meir of Chamor Gamol that has nothing to do with Suffolk, and that will be the following: that according to Rav Meir only, if you attempt to establish a Makom Shvisa elsewhere, and you halachically it was not effective, so even though it wasn't effective, it had a certain koyach. The fact that I desire to take in my Makom Shvisa over there, you know what that did? I, through that, made a renunciation with Rav Meir to travel outside that location's Eruv. That location's 2,000 Amma. Even though that Eruv didn't go into effect, but because of my verbal attempt of, over there will be my Eruv, that will affect the locations where I can walk. So we're going to have, as we'll explain in more detail, another concept, L'Rav Meir, of Chamor Gamol. Now, if a person left one's Tchum, so we learned from the beginning of the Spedic, right? Other than the case that if you were taken out by Goyim, we were brought down by Goyim. If I walked out of my Makom Tchum, I only have Daled Amas. Well, what happens if I'm only outside my Tchum by 1 Amma, or by 2 Amas, or by 3 Amas, depending how you understand the Daled Amas? And my current Daled Amas overlaps with my original Tchum Shabbos. So do we say, since it's an overlap, I can walk back in, or no? Since I'm out, I may not walk in, as we will see. This will be actually a machlokes of Tanoim. Now, another concept. If a person took in Shabbos outside a city, and they made Mekoimi, where I am, they were Ma'arav Beraglov, and now they have 2,000 Amas. If their 2,000 Amas ended 1 Amma out of the city, they cannot walk into the city, even though it's only 1 Amma out of the city. And the reason for that will be, as we will explain, that when a person takes in Shabbos B'Mekoimi, which is outside the city, even if their 2,000 Amas enters the city, they cannot walk beyond it. They are now in the Tchum of the city, it doesn't matter. They establish their own personal Tchum, 2,000 Amas away, so they can walk 2,000 Amas. But we don't say that since it goes into an enclosed area, or if it goes into a city, now they can walk. We don't say that. Masha'enken, if someone takes in Shabbos in the city, in this location, if my location now is enclosed, if my location is a city, then I do say that my 2,000 Amas only begins outside the city. The entire city will be considered for me as Daled Amas. All right. I'm going to let us start on Daf Nun Beis, Amud Aleph on top. And again, we are starting in the Mishnah. We just chazered the way Rav Nachman explained the prior machlokes. Again, according to Rav Nachman, Bein l'Rav Meir, Bein l'Rav Yehuda, the concept of making an oral declaration is only valid for a traveler. But if you are an Ashir, that means you are at home, and therefore you have bread, you want to make an Eruv outside your home, either go there place it there with a shliach, right? Or according to Rabbi Yehuda, even an Ashir can be ma'arav beraglov, right? But you can't make a verbal designation. Says the Mishnah. Mi sheyatza, a person, like the Gemara will explain in a moment, a person who owns 2 homes, he's in city A, and he's deciding to take in Shabbos in city B. And therefore he's going to city B, or he went out to go on Friday. Leilach be'ir shema arvim ba. Important here is that city B is 4,000 Amas or less close to city A. What about 4,000 Amas? You can't walk more than 2,000 Amas. Yeah. But there is a known landmark, like for example, a tree that's exactly in between these 2 cities. And if a person were to place an Eruv over there, or if a verbal declaration would have worked, then the person would be allowed to go from city A to city B. Now, the way we learned in Mishnah. He began to go out, but the hechazire chaverei. But as chaverim tell him, oh, you're going now on Friday, don't go right now, it's very hot now, it's very cold now, and anyways, you can go there tomorrow. And again, another detail that everyone in the city verbally declared, including the traveler, including the intended traveler. He began to go, oh, you know what? The tree will become our Makom Shavisa. So anyways, now that that's a Makom Shavisa, now that our ground zero is in that in-between area, so we can walk from A to B. So therefore, why should I walk when it's hot and when it's cold? I'll walk tomorrow. Okay. So says the Mishnah that since he began to go, and I'll already give you the maskana here, since he began to go, we consider his city B. He wanted to go there. He didn't only want to go there, he began to go there. So if his actual home now for the Shabbos is the home in city B, so he's considered a traveler. He's considered an ani. An ani, l'Rav Nachman, this is l'kul alma, bein l'Rav Meir, l'Rav Yehuda. An ani is allowed to make a verbal designation. He made a verbal designation. So therefore, however, even though they also made a verbal designation, but even if they had homes in city B, they did not begin to go there, which means that we considered their home in city A, so they are considered an ashir. In your home, you have bread. If you have bread, you can't make just a verbal designation. Over there will be my Makom Shvis. So therefore,
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Rabbi,
when
you said beginning to walk, is there any shiur or just like 2 steps?
We'll see in the Gemara later. He took 1 step. He took 1 step. Okay. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Now, what's important again is, guys, we're following Rav Nachman. With Rav Nachman, there is no machloikas regarding designating an area verbally. There's no nafkamina between an ani and an ashir. In other words, between Amen and Rabbi Yehuda. Yes, there is an afkamina. An ani, l'kula alma, could do it, and ashir, l'kula alma, cannot do it. Now, why are we considering this person an ani? Just because he began to walk, but he also owns a home in city A. So Rav Meir argues with Rabbi Yehuda based on the concept. Rav Meir says he's still considered an ashir. If he's considered an ashir, then he cannot make a verbal designation. So Rav Meir Aimer, Kol Shuhu Yachal La'arei V'loi Erev. In other words, why was he able to do it? Because he has bread in his current location. If you want to allow yourself to walk to city B, go send a shliach to place bread over there by the tree. And you didn't do so. So at Khan we learned it's not effective. First of all, it's not effective. Good. We're not going back in anything we said. But now what Rav Meir is adding another nuance, and this nuance is something that Rabbi Yehuda B'chlal does not agree to. Like we spoke on our introduction, that he becomes a chamor gamol, which means, again, a donkey you lead from behind, the camel you lead from the front, that he will be restricted to an area, he's still restricted to an area that it has to be within that tree's makom shvisa. And by the way, not only the guy who began to travel, all the people in the city that made this verbal declaration, on one hand, it's not effective. But on the other hand, since they expressed their desire of taking in Shabbos by the tree, they are bound by the tchum of the tree as they are bound by the tchum of where they currently are. So only the areas that overlap are areas that they can walk. And Rabbi Yehuda, like we mentioned, doesn't hold of Chamar Gamel in such a case. Either the Eruv went into effect, so then you're makim mashvisas by the tree, so then you're bound to the boundary of the tree, or Lebnei Ha'ir, if Bechlal did not go into effect. If it Bechlal did not go into effect, so then the makim hashvis of the Bnei Ha'ir is in this ear, and they're bound 100% only to the tchum of this city. Very good. Okay, says the Gemara, trying to understand the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, Maishna Ihu u Maishna Inu. Why is it that he, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is allowed to walk to city B? He succeeded in affecting the Eruv by that landmark, and the other people in the city not. They both made the same verbal declaration. It's about a person, number one, that he has 2 homes. And like we mentioned, that in between these 2 cities, you don't have more than 4,000 amos. It can be less. In other words, if you successfully placed an ERUVIN between, you will be allowed to walk. And now, Ihu, this person, this traveler, given the nafak leila orcha, as long as since he set out on his journey, so therefore we categorize him as the ani. And as we learned above, l'kula alma. It's had Rav Meir agreed that he's an ani, he would have agreed to this. With Rav Nachman, l'kula alma, an ani can make a verbal declaration with all of the details. It has to be specific. He has to be able to get there. But the people in the city, even if they also owned homes in city B, since they did not begin to travel, so we view them as residents of city A. A resident is here called an usher. And therefore, right, the verbal declaration is not effective. And with Rabbi Yehuda, it's not even chamar gamol. It's zero effective. They have nothing to do with the tchum of that landmark. Kanya nami hachi. Right, that this is the case of the Mishnah. Here the Bryson says clearly, we're speaking about someone who owns 2 homes. And in between them, there's no more than 4,000 amos. Since he went out on the journey, therefore, meaning if he made a verbal declaration, then the Eruv goes into effect. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Again, because Rabbi Yehuda views him as a ani, because his home now is city B, and Yasser al-Kain Amar Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, and here we have this other Tana that is going Rabbi Yehuda plus, that afilu mutzai chaveroi v'amar lo lin paim, even when his friends were aware of the fact that he's going to go on a trip, they tell him, no, don't go right now. You go there tomorrow on Shabbos. Anyways, you're making a tchum in between the cities. Stay over here. Why? Because a schama, because a sinai, because right now it's too hot to travel, right now it's too cold to travel. And he listened to them. Next day, he can indeed travel. Now, when you read the words of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, you don't see what exactly is he adding to Rabbi Yehuda. He's saying the same thing. So the Gemara is going to resolve, and there's going to be a machlokes amoraim, exactly what is Rabbi Yossi, but Rabbi Yehuda adding to the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. So Amar Rabbo, he's answering the kasha, like what is he doing? What is he saying? He's repeating loimer kula, that loimer kula alma loitzareh, that the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, but Rabbi Yehuda is for sure you are obligated to verbally designate the makim. No one is going to say what we're going to have soon in the Shita of Rav Yosef, that according to Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda, you don't even have to make an oral declaration. No one holds of that. Question is, what makes you an ani? According to Rabbi Yehuda, you have to actually set out on the road. Right? That's in the words of Kiva Shehechzik Baderech. Hechzik Shleim again, we'll see later. Hechzik doesn't mean that you're 20 feet into it. You have to set out you have to begin the journey. According to Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda, he didn't even set out on his journey. Elama, we know that he desired to go there. So just your desire to go to city B already makes you a resident of city B because you own a house there, which means right now you are an ani, which is why your verbal declaration will be effective. So understands the Rabbi. Rabbi Yosef Amar, no, that is not your machlokes. Everyone agrees that what? That if you didn't even begin going out on the journey, then you can't make an eruv. You're considered an usher. You have a home in city A. You are in your home in city A. Ki pligi, the machlokes is loimar, whether you have to make an oral declaration. Rabbi Yehuda holds you have to make an oral declaration. Wow. And Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda holds that once you start to travel, that makes you into an ani. And now when your friends tell you, why do you have to go there now? Now it's hot. I have the answer. You know why you have to go there right now? Because that city is 4,000 amos away from me. I can't go beyond my Tchum Shabbos. The fact that you came out, but they tell you, no, why were you not concerned about that? You were not concerned about that because obviously you're making your Makom HaShvisa in between. You're making it by the landmark. You're making it in an area where side this city, side that city is within 2,000 amos. So your action of going out is enough to indicate that you are making your Makom HaShvisa in that area that's in between city A and city B. So understands that Rabbi Yosef b'shitas Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda. Now the Gemara says, "Come on, Ozla ha the Amar Ula, mi she'achzik baderech, and ve'achziroi chaveiroi." So listen to the words of Ula. Harehu muchzar umuchzak. He's sai considered the person who has returned, and he's also considered the person who has taken to the road. So first of all, what does that mean? Muchzar, lama muchzak doesn't mean what normally lama means. Lama means how is he considered muchzak? And if he's considered someone who's muchzak baderech, so what does it mean that he's muchzak? What does Ula mean? So Ula means, says the Gemara, that afal pisha muchzar, even though he's someone who actually took the advice of his friends and he returned to city A, nevertheless, he's considered like the muchzak, which means he's considered like the ani. He's not considered the current local resident, and therefore he will successfully be able to make the verbal declaration. So is the understanding of Ula. Now that we have two options, now that we learned Rabbi Yosef's understanding in Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda, that he doesn't even have to make a verbal declaration. So Keman, Rabbi Yosef, Aliyah, Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda. Why is that? Because if he would have made an actual verbal declaration, if he would have said it verbally, then Ula would never have used the words that he's muchzar, that he's as if someone who returned. Because guys, don't forget, if I say that I'm taking in Shabbos over there by the tree, so we don't say it's as if I returned. My Makom Hashvisa is at the tree. For Ula to say that he's muchzar, you know why he's considered muchzar? Because he didn't even make a verbal declaration. And nevertheless, Ula is saying that he's still considered a person that's muchzar. That means that he effectively has his eruv by the landmark. So again, the fact that Ula calls him someone who's a muchzar, who's a muchzar, that's the word. Why is he muchzar? He's only muchzar because he didn't even make a verbal declaration. And according to Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda, that's also effective. And this is the shita that Ula is ascribing to. Okay, weiter. At the end of the third line before the bottom of the Amid. Rabbi Yehuda, Barishtasa, isolate Kalkola the Peter. Rabbi Barishtasa is bringing as a gift a basket of fruit. This is on Friday to Rav Nosson Bar Oishaya. And what's the case over here? That they lived in cities. One was 4,000 amas or less distant from each other. They were not within the normal 2,000 amas. In other words, had Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ishtasa decided to stay there, without making an eruv, he would not be able to come back. But with an eruv in between, then he would be able to make it back. Now, his original idea was, so Ke'ava Azul, he delivered this gift Friday afternoon. There was enough time for him to make it back to his home for Shabbos. He turned around to go, Ke'ava Azul, Shavke Yadenach is Darga. So then the recipient of the gift, right, Rav Nosson Bar Oishia, waited, Shlomi, that's the answer to your question, for him to take one step down. So he took a step down to return. That means he's already now considered a traveler. And now, Amalei Rav Nosson, the recipient, tells him, here's the chaim. Why don't you stay here Friday night, again, for whatever the reason, and tomorrow you can go back. Turning to Daf Nun Beis on his base. Now, what must have happened over there? Listen, if he's telling him to stay here, he's not being ma'arav b'raglov. There was no suggestion for him to send a shliach with an eruv. All of that is a raya that the fact that he took one step to begin to return, that makes him into already someone who's no longer here. He's considered a traveler. A traveler is considered an ani. An ani can make a verbal declaration. So, come on, again, Rabbi Yosef, this also will only work like Rabbi Yosef. Why is that? Because who holds that once you begin taking to the road, you have to begin taking to the road. You have to begin taking to the road. Because according to Rabbah, what did Rabbah hold? Rabbah explained that according to Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda, you don't even have to take a step. You don't even have to take a step. You have to always make a verbal declaration. No, but the fact that he made him take a step, that's because he holds like Rabbi Yosef says, maybe he holds like Rabba and Aliyah Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe he will hold that according to Rabbi Yosef, but Rabbi Yehuda, everyone says you have to make a verbal declaration. And Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda will hold that you don't even have to start traveling. You just have to desire to travel. Nevertheless, he paskined like Rabbi Yehuda, who says that no, that you have to actually begin to travel. Bottom line is that once he began to travel, listen, in our case, there's no machlokes because he did not live there. So once you begin to travel, then a verbal declaration is effective in affecting a proper eruv. Okay, now the Gemara is referring back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah quoted the sheet of Rav Meir. Rav Meir doesn't hold that just because you set out on a trip, it doesn't mean that you are a resident of the other city, even though you own a home over there. Rav Meir says if you're still here, you're considered an usher. L'kula alma, an usher cannot make a verbal declaration. But then we learned this other nuance that even though your eruv was not effective, because you're an usher, but it did affect and it limited the place that you can walk. Chamor gamol. The Gemara, Chamor Gamol, the Havamin of the Gemara is that Rav Meir, so to say, has a suffix whether the eruv was effective or not. If that would have been the pshat in Rav Meir, that he has a suffix whether your eruv was effective or not, then we don't need Rav Meir to teach Chamor Gamol because he already taught that in the Daf Lamed Hey. There were many cases over there. Whenever there's a suffix, makes sense. So you don't know which place is the eruv. Chamor Gamol. That when there's a suffix, Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda Hazez a Chamor Gamol. So explains Rav Sheshes. That's exactly the chiddush of our Mishnah. Here there is no suffix. Here there's another application of Chamor Gamol. That loy tema tama de Rav Meir is only, or in our Mishnah, that he doesn't know whether you're considered an ani or an usher. But mainly he has a suffix whether you are ma'arev or not. And that's the reason why he said Chamor Gamol. Don't say that's pshat. But if there would have been a case where you made a verbal declaration, but your verbal declaration did not work, then Rav Meir would not say Chamor Gamol, which is taka the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, says Rav Sheshes. That's the whole chiddush. That's the reason why Rabbi Meir brings back these words of Chamor Gamol, Elo afilu vadei lo eira, which is the shita of Rav Meir. Rav Meir holds that I don't care that you own a house in city B, and I don't care that you began to travel, and I don't care that you made a verbal declaration. If you changed your mind and you're spending Friday night in your house in city A, you are a resident of city A. If you wanted to designate eruv 2,000 amas away from here, just verbally, you can't do that. An usher cannot be ma'ared like that. So it zicha did not work, but it worked l'chumra, even though the eruv did not go into effect. Have a Chamor Gamol Gavaldi. You attempted to establish a Shabbos resident, right? So it's whenever I attempt, that's the word. When I attempt to establish a residence over there, you know what I'm doing? I am renunciating the rights for me to walk 2,000 amas from here. And that renunciation is effective. Gewalt is effective. So in other words, I can't walk to the other city. I can't walk beyond the landmark. Why can't I walk beyond the landmark? Because I can only walk in that direction 2,000 amas from where I am. But I cannot walk in the opposite direction. I can't walk in the opposite direction either because I will not be allowed to walk outside the 2,000 amas from where I wanted to take in Shabbos. In other words, the fact that I didn't want to begin Shabbos here, I said I want to take in Shabbos there, so I removed myself from my current location. On the other hand, that did not go into effect. So that's another application of Chamor Gamol. Okay, weiter. Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Mi sheyatza chutz l'tchum. A person who left the tchum, what's the din, my friends? If you leave the tchum, ein lo ela daled amas. Right? Now, it means you get a new tchum, but you can't go back. Now, what happens if you only left the tchum 1 amma? But melo what? Melo you can think that since you have 4 amas, you have 4 amas. And your new 4 amas overlap the original tchum, So maybe you should be allowed to, you're going to walk the 4 amas, so you can walk back in. You're within the 4 amas, and once you are back in, you're back in. Now, guys, in the first Mishnah in the Perek, there we learned that if a person was removed against his will, and then he was brought back again, no, then he gets his old Eruv back. But that was not the case over here. Here he left willingly, even though he only left 1 amma, which means he's given now, he has a new tchum of Dalad Amas, and the Dalad Amas allow him to walk a little bit back in the old tchum. Yeah, you chap what's going on over here? Says the Mishnah.
No, Rabbi, can you please explain it again?
Yes. When a person, the first Mishnah on the page, I begin Shabbos in the city. I have a tchum, wherever my tchum is. If I am taking out of my tchum against my will, whether by Nachrim, whether by Ruach Ra, and then I was brought back, back in my original tchum, I get my original tchum back. Okay. If I leave my tchum, once I'm outside my tchum, ainli ela dalad amas. If I leave my tchum only 1 amma, I'm very close to my original tchum. I have dalad amas. These dalad amas overlap my original tchum, which means that if I'm going to walk within those dalad amas back to the direction of my city, I did nothing wrong. I re-entered my tchum beheter. So will we say, now that I am back inside my tchum, now I should be allowed to use the whole city? Now, if I would have been taken out b'shoigeg, then we would say that. If I would have been taken out b'shoigeg, the first Mishnah in the Perek, here the Mishnah is speaking about mishiyatza means you did it willingly, you did it b'mezit. Now we don't say that since it overlaps. Hadez elo yukanes. Now, guys, you can walk for amas. You can walk for amas. It means physically you'll be back in the old city's tchum, but you'll be stuck to the 4 amas. You can't fully re-enter the city. However, Rabbi Eliezer disagrees. He says as long as there is overlap, since your re-entry is beheter, you get back the old tchum. But now we have to go into another nuance. That's the Mishnah Daf Mem Hey in the bottom. And that is like this. When you have dalad amas, remember we had a 3-way machlokes tanoim. The way the Gemara concluded. The Tanach holds 4 amas really means you have 8 amas. From wherever you are, you can go in each direction 4 amas. Rabbi Yehuda held, I'm just skipping Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yehuda, you only have 4 amas, but you get to choose which direction. You can say by verbally or by walking there. And Rabbi Eliezer, which is the most machmer, says 4 amas means that wherever you are in the center of it. You have only 2 amas here and 2 amas there. 2 amas in the front, 2 amas in the back. Rabbi Eliezer was the most limiting of the 4 amas. But here he's lenient. Even though he keeps to his limited 4 amas, so you only have really 2 amas in each direction. So says Rabbi Eliezer, Shtayim, if you are only 2 amas out of your old tchum, which means that you have now a new 4 amma tchum, which means that you are v'hu be'emtza'an. Those were the words of Rabbi Eliezer. So you can walk back 2 amas. If when you walk back 2 amas, you enter the old boundary, once you are back, then you're fully back. Then you can go back to your house. Then you kones. It's only if shalosh, if you are 3 amas out of your old chum, and Rabbi Eliezer, not like Rabbi Yehuda, not like the Chachamim. 4 amas means to each direction you only have 2 amas. You are be'emtzon. So once you went beyond to shalosh, so then indeed lo yakonis. Then okay, then you can't re-enter. Okay, says the Gemara. Rabbi Chanina. Another kasha. These are typical Talmudic questions. Ragli achaz b'teichat chum. Person went all the way to the boundary, right? Once you left, you're in trouble. Okay, you put 1 foot out, 1 foot is still in. So says Rabbi Chanina lo yikones. That's it. You're out a little bit, you're out. Why is that? So interestingly, we're going to have actually 2 versions what Rabbi Chanina said, and both of them are based from the same pasuk in Yeshaya that reads, Im Tashuv Mishabas Raglecha. That's the way we read it. We read it as if there is a yud after the lamed. Raglecha is feet b'lashon rabim. Mitashuva under the lamed, the way it's written, it's not the kri diksiv, right? Lamed langechof. Raglecha means 1 foot. Im Tashuv Mishabas means that if you will restrain your foot on the account of Shabbos. In other words, restrain your foot. Don't even allow 1 foot to go out. That's what the pasuk is saying. Raglecha ksiv. I know that we read it that the kri is raglecha. That's the way it's voweled. But since it's written without a yud, so let's expound the ksiv. And therefore, the Torah is telling you, restrain even 1 foot from leaving the tchum. So if you broke that, once you put a foot out, your out is out. And therefore, let's go according to the Tanach and our Mishnah. Okay, you have a new daladamas, but that's all you have. I frag the Gemara against Rabbi Chanina. It says in a brayso the opposite, that ragli achas v'teichat chum, v'ragli achas chutz l'tchum. Since you still have 1 foot here, then yes, you kanes. And so the Gemara says, well, first of all, yeah, correct, clearly against Rabbi Chanina. We can't faren for that, but you should know that it's a machloikas tanoim, and that brayso follows the shita of acherim, which generally, as we have at the end of Hoyri, is Daf Yud Gimel, that refers to Rabbi Meir after a certain incident. Acherim idatanya, acherim oimrim, that how do we determine where a person is? L'makrim sherubai hu niskar, a person is placed where the majority of his body is. And when we're speaking about 1 leg out, everyone has a different picture in their head. I know that it's shaykh to have 1 leg out with the majority of your body, but that's not the case we are referring to. We're speaking about a person who's walking out of their tchum. So when you walk, you place 1 foot ahead of you, like the letter Gimel, and you place the leg there, and before your body went after the leg, you said, "Oy Gamal, this is the end of the tchum." So we're speaking about a case where it's only your 1 leg, but the raiv of you is still inside the tchum. And that's why the brayso says that if it's only raglei achas chutz l'tchum, you kanes. But by the way, that's only acherim. And we don't subscribe to acherim, so holds the Gemara. We hold based on the ksiv, right? That we read it with Ashra, which means Lashon Yachid, and the God is telling us, the Navi is telling us, this is Medivrei Kabbalah, that restrain your foot. 1 foot, you didn't restrain your foot. Shalom, you lost your tchum. Ikada Amri, punkt verkehrt. Dat Rabbi Chanina, Ragli Achas v'teichat chum, Ragli Achas chutz l'tchum, punkt verkehrt, since only 1 foot left, and you can still go back in. And that's based on the same pasuk in Yeshaya Dersiv, Im Toshuv Mishabis Rag Lecha. It's taka not written with a yud after the lamed. Doesn't matter, but we have an oral tradition that pasuk should be read. That's the way we read it. Rag Lecha. Rag Lecha means Lashon Abed, which means that if God is telling us, the Navi is telling us, restrain your feet of leaving the tchum. Only if both of your feet were not restrained, now you lost the old tchum, now you have a new tchum of daladats. Vatanya says in a brayso, lo yikanes, everything is punkt verkehrt now. So the Gemara answers, you're right, it's tak another brayso that says lo yikanes, but Rab Chanina now will hold like acherim. The Tanya, like we just quoted, l'makim sherobai, who niskar, a person is placed where the roiv of his body is, and therefore if only 1 leg went out, then you go after the roiv, and therefore Yekanis. Actually, according to this, Yekanis doesn't mean Yekanis. Yekanis means you never left. Okay. Now, the Mishnah said that the Chachamim, that Tanach is the one that holds that if you left your tchum, even though there is overlap, you're out. Rabbi Eliezer holds that if there is overlap, and therefore if you walking back the 2 amas is beheter, it's in your new tchum, and now that you walk back the 2 amas, you are within the old tchum border. Once you're back in, you can go back to the old tchum border. Rabbi Eliezer, Stein Yekanes, Stein means 2 or less. It's only if 3, then lo Yekanes. I frag the Gemara about Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer, only if you left achas, can you then come back in? But if you left Stein, lo Yekanes. So the Gemara says that's not a kasha. When it says you left 1, it means you fully left 1, and you are now standing in the second. And by the way, that's the case of the Mishnah. But since you are standing in the second, Rabbi Eliezer says you only have daladamas. Rabbi Eliezer says in Daf Mem Hey Buhu Be'emtzon Seder, but you have 2 amas. You are in the second amma. So you can come back in. The brayso that says that Shtayim Lo Yekanes means you went beyond Shtayim. The brayso says the Akar Tarta, you already went out. Not only did you leave your tchum, you left your tchum plus 2 amas. You are now in the 3rd amma, and that's why you cannot come back in. Fragt die Gemara, Tanya, we learned in Rabbi Isa, Rabbi Eliezer, Afilo ama achas lo yikones. Now what do you do with this? Afilo ama achas, he sounds mamish like the Tanach of our Mishnah. So the Gemara says this last brisa that you quoted is b'chlal not speaking about the case of the Mishnah. Case of our Mishnah is a person takes on Shabbos in a city. If you take on Shabbos in a city, then you have a limit. However you count it. First you go to the boundary of the city. Then you add 2,000 amas. Then you have a tchum. That's the tchum. You went beyond that. Rabbi Eliezer holds if you are in the second amma, and avad if you are in the first, yes, you could come back in. The Bryce is speaking about a case, l'moided. L'moided means we're speaking about a person who Shabbos, he was outside the city's tchum, right? And he went ahead and he did a verbal declaration, not the verbal declaration of the last sugya, where he's saying, I want my eruv to be over there. No, he said that shvisasi b'mekoimi. What's the din when you say shvisasi b'mekoimi? So whether this is you're being ma'arav baraglov, whether this is subject to a machlekes of Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda without pas, whether this is not subject to that we learned in the last sugya, but whatever that is. You made an eruv in your place. What's the din right now? If you said shvisasi b'mekoimi, you have 2,000 amos. Now what are you doing? You're trying to make it back to your city. You know why you're trying to make it back into your city? Because you erroneously think that if you would actually be able to step into the city's boundaries, once you're in, you're in. That's what you think, which is wrong. If you take in Shabbos outside a city and you say shvisasi b'mekoimi and you taka have 2,000 amas, that all you have is 2,000 amas. But this guy wants to make an epis into the city. He also can't. So says this Braisa, that what says that Rabbi Eliezer, that even though the moided, another detail, moided means if I'm outside in the field, how would I know where my tchum ends? You know, when I'm living in a city, it was common in the times of Chazal that they would actually put markers in the ground by saying at kan tchum Shabbos. They would have markers. You would know when you're outside the city, and then you say, okay, shvisasi b'mekoimi. So Chazal, remember that? First you have 4 amas. Really, you have 2,004 amas. You have 4 amas. Then you have 2,000 amas. How do you know where it ends? We also learned that above. You know what you do? You walk an average step, and we say that an average step is 1 amma. So you're measuring. So you're walking. You walked 4 amas. Now you're walking 2,000 amas, and you're hoping to make it back into the city. You come 1 amma outside the city. So Rabbi Eliezer says you can't go beyond that. You can't go, but you are within 2 amas from the city. That's the way Rabbi Eliezer wants to say it. You can't compare. It's apples and oranges. The case of our Mishnah, the case of the Baraisa is you took in Shabbos in the city. You were allowed to walk in the whole Tchum Shabbos. You now, after Shabbos came in, you walked outside the Tchum. You're given a new Tchum, 4 amas. If that overlaps, Rabbi Eliezer says you can walk back in because and once you walk back in, you go back to your original Tchum. That's okay. But if you took in Shabbos out there in the field, shvisasi b'mekoimi, all you have is 2,000 amas. And if those 2,000 amas come within 1 amma of the city, so what? You can't walk into the city. And this is the Tanan, as we learned, ulamoided. Again, the measure is the person who said shvisasi b'mekoimi. How would he bechlal know where the 2,000 amas ends? You measure it by walking. You count your steps. The Mishnah makes a very important point. Even if you could walk into an enclosed area, your 2,000 amas will walk you into a city. It doesn't mean that since you are now in a new enclosed area, doesn't mean that since you are in the city, now you can subscribe to walking into the whole city because the whole city is considered daled amas. We don't say that. The whole city is only considered daled amas for someone whose makom shvisa was the city. But you said shvisasi b'mekoimi out there in the field. You were given actually literally daled amas plus the 2,000 amas. So even if you would have entered the city, you can't go beyond the 2,000 amma limit. So Avada, Rabbi Eliezer is saying that if you didn't even enter the city, you're 1 amma out of the city. Don't come and tell me, I'm 1 amma out of the city. I'm within 2 ammas from the city. Let me walk into the city. No, you can't. Even if you would have walked into the city, you can't take 1 step further. So it has nothing to do with you being close or near the city. Okay, guys, we're good. And now we're going to learn, Chevra, the final Mishnah in this page. The Bartanura, to make the Mishnah, to make it work, writes clearly that this Mishnah is dafka not where a person said Shvisasi b'Mekaymi. That's not the case of the Mishnah. There was a person that was trying to make it back home. He's outside his city, right? If he would have said Shvisasi b'Mekaymi, we already explained the din. The din is you would have 4 amas plus to each direction 2,000 amas, but you would never be allowed to walk more than that. And even if your 2,000 amas brings you into the city, if your home is beyond the 2,000 amas from your Makim Shvisa, I'm sorry, you can be a step away from your house, you can't walk into your house. The case of the Mishnah is that a person thought that they'll make it back to the city for Shabbos, right? Like all of these stories. It's almost Lichben and you're trying to make it back home. You're rushing to make it back home. You did not want to take in Shabbos out there in the field. You didn't say Shvisasi b'Mekaymi, nor did you want. You wanted your Shvisa to be in the city. Now let me ask you a question. What happens if the city was beyond 2,000 amas from where you were? See, here it's different. See, you didn't take in your Makom HaShvisa outside the city. You wanted your Makom HaShvisa to be in the city. You thought that when Ben Hashmashas came, you were already 2,000 amas from the city. You thought you were in the Tchum. But you know what you discovered? You were not. You know how you discovered that? Because from when it got dark, you began to walk, you took 2,000 steps, and you didn't make it back in the boundary of the city. Says the Mishnah, he was outside the Tchum when it got dark. But again, he did not make his outside the Makom Shvisa. He was aiming to make it back in. And now again, he's walking. He's walking to the city. Now, if he would have been within 2,000 amas from the city, then there would be no problem. Because then his Makom HaShvisa is the city. He's within the Tchum of the city. Then when he would have entered the city, then he can walk the whole city, and he can walk to the other side of the city, another 2,000 amas. He would be like any B'nai Ha'ir. Came out that he wasn't 2,000 amas away from the city. He was 1 amma short. Now this is Geschmack. It's not like the story we had before. The story we had before, if you make your Makom HaShvisa, if you make it outside the city, even if your 2,000 amas take you into the city, but you can only walk 2,000 amas from your Makom HaShvisa. Right? So if you enter the city, so what? You can only go until the 2,000 amas. Here, if you would have made it into the city, then you would be like any B'nai Ha'ir. Elamat came out, Misha Echel Chutz L'Tchum, and you discovered by walking, you're being moided, you're counting your steps. And after it was dark, and you take 2,000 steps, and you come within 1 amma from the city. Afila amma achas, here again says the Mishnah, lo yikanes. Makes sense? Lo yikanes. And by the way, this goes even according to Rabbi Eliezer, because here there's no overlap. Here there's 0 overlap. You're walking towards the city was not violating anything. You're walking 2,000 amas, and it came out that you don't have that's the end. That's the end of your 2,000 amas. Yes, Shlomo.
Can you walk without making a shvisa there, like 2,000 amas?
Yes.
What do you mean you didn't violate anything?
Because you thought that you were already in the Tchum of the city. Just like if I take in Shabbos here in LA, not only can I walk the whole LA, I can walk to the end of the 2,000 amas outside the city. If you are within that, you're within the city. He thought he's within the city. So he's walking toward, but he's counting his steps, says, oh, Gewalt, I counted 2,000 steps and I'm 1 step out. So if you're out, you're out. Now it came out that you're not within the city. So lo yikanes, l'kol alma. However, now we're going to learn the final din of the Spedic, a gewaldige thing. Again, guys, this is based on the fact that in most times, in most cities, in the times of Chazal, there was actually markers that wrote ad kan tchum Shabbos. So when we're speaking about Misha Hechshen Chutz L'Tchum, Afila Ama Achas, you know what happened? You walked, and you see the marker, and you're 1 amma, you're 1.5 feet, you're 1.8, 1.9, however you measure amma, feet, away from that marker. You're away from the marker. That means you're outside the tchum. Oh, so says the Mishnah, I want to say more shlemis. Since you wanted to make Shabbos in the city, That's like a declaration. You're going to the city. The city is your tchum, but you didn't make it there. It means you made a mistake. Rab Shimon has a shita, even if you are 15 amas away from the marker at kan tchum Shabbos, you should know. Now let's go. You're coming from the outside to the inside. Let's flip it. When people in the city, when they put these markers, right? So they are in the city. We're going to begin the next Pedic learning. From where do you begin to measure 2,000 amas? From the boundary of the city. Where is that? Not so pashut. We're very lenient. But they made the boundaries of the cities. Then they measured 2,000 amas. Do you know what they do lechatchila? They lechatchila bring it closer to the city, 15 amas. It's al derech, the Shitas Rabbeinu of the Alter Rebbe, that whenever you look at your Zman and when Shkia is, really, Shkia is a few minutes later. They bring it in closer, so just in case someone, right, is going to spazier out of the city, and they're going to walk outside the markers where it says At Tchum Shabbos, and then they're going to say, Oy Gewalt, I made a mistake. I walked outside the Tchum. And what's the whole Pedic telling you? That if you walked outside the Tchum Shabbos, Ein Ela Dal Adamas. So to prevent that from happening, they bring it back 15 amas. So if you're walking and you think and you see physically you are 1 amma before the marker upon which it says At Tchum Shabbos, sollst du wissen sein that you're good to go. Because really, you know what that means? It means that you succeeded in making it back in the city. You made it back in the city. That means when Shabbos came in, you are within 2,000 amas from the city. And you made the city into your Makom HaShvisa. Why is that? That the people who make the measurements, who to place these placates, these markers of At Kan Tchum Shabbos, they don't give the full measure. They don't go all the way to the end. Why don't they go until the end? Because of those who make a mistake. There's a big machlekes Rishonim how to learn it. We learned it according to one shita, and let's just finish up. Tani, we learned in a brayso. According to some, is that people, not the measurers, according to some other Rishonim. The people in the city, they want to go for a walk on Shabbos, and sometimes they get engrossed in their own thoughts. We learned before a person that was learning Torah, and that's mamash shoygeg. People sometimes will go a little bit out of the boundary. So they wanted to give a lee room that even if you walked out of the physical At Kan Tchum Shabbos marker, you should know that you are still within the Tchum Shabbos, and they do it for some reason for 15 amas. So therefore, the same concept of Rab Shimon would be that if you are walking and you are 16 amas before you hit the Tchum, then again, even according to Rab Shimon, Harei Lo Yekanes, but not in the case of 1 amma, we say, Hadron, Allah Misha Itziyu, God willing, will return to you, Pedic Revi'i, and God willing, the next year we will begin the 5th Pedic of Shabbos, which will be the final Pedic that will deal with the laws of ERUVIN Tchumen. Next Pedic will be a very important Pedic, like we keep on mentioning. How do you measure the Tchum Shabbos of a city? How do you measure the boundary of a city? A city is not an exact square. So we're going to see Gewaldige leniencies, how to first establish the boundaries of the city, Lekula. Then from there you measure the 2,000 amas, and at the end of that is Taka the Tchum of Shabbos, God willing, to be continued.
Rabbi, when's the next class?
So the next class is normal. The next class will be Sunday morning at 6 o'clock. I want to say like this, that Sunday morning, we're going to have basically 2 daf of a lot of Agadita. It's going to be very Geshmaka, easy Gemara. And the challenge will be Tuesday morning. Tuesday morning, we'll have real cheshboinus over here. People have to get the pictures ready. Tuesday morning will be the class at 5. Not 10, at 5, because we have to get in 2 daf from 5 to 7. And it's going to be a fun 2 daf. Good.
Shabbos.
Shabbos.